Ever walked away from a conversation smiling on the outside, but burning on the inside? What if I told you that ancient wisdom, yes, from men in togas, could help you reclaim your dignity without ever raising your voice? They don't attack with fists. They strike with sarcasm, passive jabs, and silent judgment. And you? You're about to learn how to face it all with calm power. Your dignity, your self-worth, is yours to guard, no one else's. But here's the hard truth. Some people seem determined to test your boundaries like it's their full-time job. You know the type. They sneak in snide remarks at dinner, drop a jab during a team meeting, or laugh off a joke that somehow leaves you feeling 2 inches tall. And in those moments, there's silence, a sting in your chest. You fake a smile, maybe chuckle along, but deep down you're asking yourself, why me? Why do I feel like a walking target? Let me be clear. It's not you, it's them. And today I'm going to break down exactly why they do it. 6 psychological reasons to be exact. But more importantly, I'll show you how the timeless principles of Stoicism can help you rise above it. No shouting matches, no revenge plans, just grounded clarity and an unshakable sense of self. So if you've had enough of swallowing your pride and you're ready to reclaim your power, drop a yes in the comments, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Because we're going in. Reason 1. They sense weakness. Some people test boundaries the way predators test prey. Quietly, intentionally. They don't come at you directly. They observe. They wait. And the second they see hesitation, the moment they sense even a flicker of self-doubt, they pounce. Sometimes it's a casual remark. Other times it's a joke with a hidden blade. And if you sit there and let it pass, if you pretend you're unaffected, you're not fooling them. You're training them. Because these people, they're not being careless, they're calculating. They're probing to see how far they can push you. I remember early in my career I had a manager like that. Sharp tongue. Not the clever kind, the cruel kind. He didn't tease, he targeted. During meetings he'd say things like, "This might be a bit too advanced for you," or "Don't worry, you'll catch up later." Always with that smirk. At first I laughed with everyone else, told myself it wasn't personal, but it was. And every time I stayed silent, it got worse. Because silence doesn't just signal acceptance, it gives permission. This is exactly where Stoicism becomes your shield. It's not about pretending you don't feel hurt. It's about realizing where your true power lies. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not outside events. You can't stop someone from being rude. You can't control if they try to belittle you. But you do control the outcome. You control whether their words shape your identity or fall flat. Standing up for yourself doesn't always require words. Sometimes it just means refusing to play the role they've assigned you. Let's pick up where we left off. In the last section, we talked about how people test boundaries, how they push until you push back. But here's a deeper, often uncomfortable truth. If you don't respect yourself, no one else will. If you allow others to humiliate you and stay silent, you don't just endure it, you invite it again. Not because you deserve it, but because, through your silence, you've unintentionally signaled that you'll accept it. Humans, whether we realize it or not, are wired to test hierarchies. It's in our social DNA. Some do it with good intentions, others with selfish motives. But the pattern is clear. When someone pushes, they're looking for your line. And if they don't find one, they assume there isn't one. It's not always driven by malice. Often it's simply driven by opportunity. and people will keep taking until you show them they can't. Here's what I've learned. The insight I hope stays with you. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look like confrontation. It's not about slamming your fist on the table or raising your voice. Sometimes it's subtle, quiet, calm, controlled. It looks like not laughing at a joke that targets you. It looks like holding someone's gaze when they try to mock you, letting silence carry the weight your words don't need to. It looks like walking away from rooms where your worth isn't acknowledged, without apology, without drama, without needing to explain a thing. That's Stoic strength. Not because it's cold or distant, but because it's disciplined, because it's rooted in self-respect, not ego, not rage. You have to protect your dignity, not because the world will protect it for you, but because it's yours. It belongs to you, and it's your job to defend it. And when you do, when you finally draw that line, something shifts. People feel it. The ones who used to test you begin to hesitate. Often they move on quickly because they're not looking for resistance. They're looking for an easy target. And you no longer are. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to defend your standards. You only need to honor them and hold them. And here's the real turning point. The respect you gain isn't just from others, it's from yourself. You begin to feel solid, grounded. You stop questioning your place. You stop doubting your value. And you start believing, I can handle this. Not because I control the world, but because I control my response to it. That's what Stoicism offers. Not a shield to hide behind, but armor to walk through life with. Armor made not of steel, but of clarity, discipline, and dignity. Reason 2, they want control. Let's talk about one of the oldest tools of domination, humiliation. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's sharp and public. But the goal is always the same. To make you feel small so someone else can feel big. When someone embarrasses you in front of others, when they throw out a sharp jab across the room, or expose something private. They had no right to. What they're really trying to do is take something from you. Your voice, your confidence, your power. Because if they can make you shrink, they get to appear taller in comparison. But here's the part most people never see: the person doing the humiliating. They're often carrying their own wounds. Wounds they've never faced, insecurities they've never healed. And instead of addressing their pain, they do something easier. They tear others down to feel strong, if only for a moment. I remember working with someone like that. She always had a way of cutting people down, usually with a laugh, as if humor made it harmless. One afternoon, I presented an idea I had spent weeks developing. Barely a second after I finished, she chimed in with a sarcastic quip. It was sharp, quick, right on cue. It drew a few nervous chuckles from the room, but it wasn't the words. That stung. It was the intention behind them, the timing, the precision. It was designed to make me question everything I'd just said. And for a moment, I did. My face got hot. I felt the urge to explain myself, to defend the idea, to prove I belonged, but I didn't. Because deep down, something inside me, call it instinct or something I had finally learned, told me the worst thing I could do was to play by her rules. Her power wasn't in the comment. It was in whether I believed it. It was in my reaction. Would I crumble or remain centered? And that's where Stoicism shows you something powerful. The battle is never really about what they say. It's about what you believe. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. They can insult you, but only you can decide whether the insult lands. Only you can decide if their voice becomes your inner voice. And when you refuse, when you quietly hold your ground, they lose control and you regain yours. People can attack you with words, but they only succeed if you believe them. Let's continue where we left off. Earlier, we talked about how humiliation only works if you allow it to enter your mind. That's exactly what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." People will try to humiliate you. They'll say things meant to hurt, sometimes to your face, sometimes behind your back. You can't stop them from trying, but you can stop them from succeeding. They can't control your mind unless you hand them the reins. And once you realize that, once you stop believing the lies they try to feed you about your worth, their power disappears. It dissolves. A person who refuses to believe in their own inferiority cannot be humiliated. Not because they lash out, not because they always get the last word, but because they know exactly who they are. You can't tear down someone who has built their identity from the inside out. You can't silence a person who doesn't need external approval to feel valuable. If there's one truth you carry with you after this, let it be this: humiliation only works when you allow someone to convince you that you deserve it. You don't, and you never did. The people who weaponize shame are revealing something about themselves. But you, and through your response, reveal who you are. And if you choose clarity over confusion, dignity over defensiveness, and mastery over your own mind, you'll notice something remarkable. They lose interest because you're not prey. You're not small. You're someone who cannot be controlled because you've learned to control yourself. That's the power Stoicism offers, not a shield to block painful words, but a mindset so clear, so grounded, that those words pass through you like wind through open hands. There's nothing for them to hold on to because you refuse to give them weight. Reason 3. They envy you. This may be one of the hardest truths to accept, but it's one you need to hear. Sometimes people humiliate you, not because there's something wrong with you, but because there's something deeply unsettled inside them, and the very qualities that make you admirable, your strength, your discipline, your calm presence, are the very things that unsettle them. When you walk tall, when you carry yourself with quiet confidence, when you live by principles they abandoned long ago, you become a mirror, and that reflection forces them to confront what they're lacking. But instead of rising to meet that standard, they choose the easier path, tearing you down, not to help you, but to silence the reminder that they stopped trying. Psychologists call this malicious envy, a darker, more toxic form of envy that goes beyond occasional jealousy. Studies in emotional psychology show that malicious envy often leads to something called schadenfreude, a twisted sense of pleasure when someone they envy stumbles or fails. They don't want to see you succeed, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your success makes them feel like less, but they won't tell you that. Instead, they'll find subtle, or not so subtle, ways to mock, diminish, or embarrass you in front of others. Not because they think you're weak, but because they know you're strong. Seneca understood this deeply when he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." A person can have everything, status, possessions, recognition, but still live in poverty. If their soul is starved for peace, and so they strike, not because they hate your light, but because they've forgotten how to kindle their own. But once you understand this, something shifts inside. The shame you used to feel when they tried to put you down it begins to fade. You stop thinking, "What's wrong with me?" and start realizing this isn't about me. You stop carrying their bitterness as your burden, and if anything, you begin to feel a quiet sense of pity, not condescension, not superiority, but a calm understanding that they're battling demons you've already made peace with. We just explored how envy often drives humiliation and why you should never shrink yourself to make others comfortable. This leads us to another core teaching of Stoicism. We may not control what others do, but we can absolutely control what we make it mean. So when someone tries to hurt you out of envy, you don't shrink. You don't make yourself smaller just to ease their insecurity. You stay rooted, firm in who you are, because their inability to stand in your light is not your burden. It never was. If you found these insights valuable so far, drop a yes in the comments. Your voice matters, and I'd love to hear from you. Reason 4, you haven't set boundaries. Here's a truth few are willing to admit. If you don't clearly define what is acceptable and what is not, people will test you, not always out of malice. In fact, most of the time it's unconscious. It's human nature. We test limits, we push boundaries, sometimes intentionally, sometimes without even realizing it. Why? Because we want to know where the line is, and if we don't find one, we assume there isn't one, so they push a little more. A joke at your expense here, a bit of casual disrespect there. And because you stay silent, because you tell yourself it's not worth the trouble, they keep going. Bit by bit, they take up more space in your life. Until one day you look around and realize you're standing in a space that no longer feels like your own. The things you once thought were obvious, that you deserve respect, that your time matters, that your emotions carry weight, are no longer the unspoken rules in the relationship. Now the disrespect feels normal. You wonder, how did it get this far? But if you're being honest, it started the moment you failed to say enough. That's why Epictetus warned, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. It sounds harsh, but it speaks to a truth most people avoid. Setting boundaries often comes with social cost. People might misunderstand you. They might call you difficult, cold, arrogant. Especially those who were once very comfortable benefiting from your silence. But if you want peace, you can't also be obsessed with approval. You can't have both. Stoicism teaches peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of discipline. It's knowing where you stand and refusing to move, even if it means standing alone. Take Oprah Winfrey, for example. Early in her career, she worked as a young reporter for a news station in Baltimore. She was told she wasn't fit for television. Producers criticized her appearance, her weight, even the way she spoke. There was pressure to change, to conform to what they believed was acceptable, and honestly, it would have been easy to fold, to shape herself into the image they wanted. But Oprah drew a line. She refused to change her authentic self just to gain the approval of people who couldn't see her worth. Eventually, she was fired. To some, that might have looked like proof she was wrong. But she didn't believe that. Because Oprah understood what Epictetus was teaching. Sometimes you must be willing to be seen as foolish or stubborn, to risk rejection, in order to remain true to your values. And we all know how her story turned out. Oprah went on to build an empire rooted in authenticity, empathy, and self-respect. She became one of the most influential and respected figures in the world. Not because she fit someone else's definition of worth, but because she held her ground when it mattered most. That's the essence of Stoicism. You don't set boundaries, so that people will like you more. You set them because you respect yourself. And when you do, when you calmly and consistently hold your boundaries, people respond in one of two ways. They either learn to respect them, or they leave. Either outcome leads to peace, but that peace doesn't come cheap. It means being willing to be seen as difficult or unreasonable by people who only know how to operate in relationships built on silence and self-sacrifice. Because real dignity often walks hand in hand with solitude. And when you start living from that place, when your self-respect becomes your center of gravity, something shifts. The world begins to adjust. The ones who remain in your life learn exactly where the line is. The ones who can't handle that boundary, they drift away, and you no longer carry the burden of making them stay. Reason 5, they seek an audience. Let's be honest, humiliation almost never happens in private. It feeds on attention. It needs witnesses. Without an audience, it loses its power. The ones who humiliate others, especially those who do it regularly, don't crave justice. They crave eyes on them. They crave reactions. Why? Because deep down their cruelty feels meaningless without applause. Think about it. Have you ever been in a conference room where someone in charge tore down a colleague, not because they made a serious mistake, but to assert dominance? Or maybe back in school, when a group picked on a quiet kid, not because he did anything wrong, but simply because he was an easy target. The person being humiliated is rarely chosen because they're weak. They're chosen because they're isolated, because no one is standing beside them. That's the formula. That's how bullies work. They find the ones who stand alone and test if they can make them kneel. And the worst part? The crowd makes it worse. There's a hard truth about human behavior. People in groups are easier to manipulate. Psychologists call this de-individuation. It's the moment people stop thinking for themselves and start going along with the ashram group, even when it goes against their values. They laugh when they don't mean to. They stay silent when they should speak. Why? Because fear makes them complicit. They don't want to be the next target, so they blend in. And that silence, that nervous laughter, it fuels the performance. The person leading the humiliation depends on this dynamic. They know how it works. Their cruelty becomes a show, and the shame of another human being becomes their applause line. But here's the twist. What looks like power is actually weakness. Anyone who needs a crowd to validate their dominance is already revealing the truth. They're not strong enough to stand alone. Now contrast that with someone like Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men in history, surrounded by generals, senators, and advisors, all bowing in his presence, said, "Yet, Marcus was known for his humility, his restraint, and his wisdom. He didn't belittle others to prove his power. He didn't need to. In fact, he reminded himself often that public approval meant nothing, especially when it came from people who lacked understanding. He once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." He understood something most people never learn. The crowd's approval is fickle, it's shallow, and it's often rooted in fear, not in wisdom. True strength doesn't need a chorus of praise. True power doesn't shout to be seen. And here's the lesson for you. When someone tries to humiliate you in public, their most dangerous weapon isn't their words. It's the crowd's reaction. They want you to feel alone, to believe the silence or laughter around you is proof that you've lost. But here's the truth. Their laughter is hollow. Their silence is fear, and you owe them nothing. Not your explanation, not your defense, not a single piece of yourself. The Stoic path teaches something far more valuable: to stand with dignity, even when surrounded by cowards. To walk alone if necessary, rather than follow a crowd that's lost its way. To remember that people who need an audience to feel powerful were never powerful to begin with. And you don't need an audience to know your worth. You don't need the cheers of those who praise the loudest voice. You need only this: your own steady mind, your own clear sense of right and wrong, and the discipline to stay upright, even when everything around you urges you to fall in line. That is the heart of Stoicism, and that's where true power lives, not in applause, not in the fear of others, but in the quiet, unshakable dignity of someone who refuses to be made small by the noise of the crowd. If what you just heard spoke to you, do me a favor. Give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Because every time I discover a new perspective on life, I want you to be the first to hear it.